Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. I'm here with Nick Wisekal. Is that right?
Yep.
Perfect. So, Nick Wisekal, you are an author. I believe you write sci-fi and fantasy books. Is that correct?
Very correct.
So, tell me a little bit. Where are you in your author career as of now?
I'd say close to the beginning because I've been writing since I've been in high school. I
Okay.
only really started pursuing it as a business or getting everything together when I was 28 and I went to a convention called DFW Con. Have you heard of it?
I have not, coincidentally. You have to
Okay,
tell me what that is.
it's the largest writing and author conference in the Midwest or Southwest.
Oh,
I get
cool.
those flipped sometimes,
Yeah.
but yeah, they're literally hundreds and thousands of people come, different classes, different events to discuss different things, everything from the business of writing to writing techniques. And seeing all those people together really made it reality for me. So when I got out of the conference, I decided, oh, let's do this for real. Let's see what it can do. And then I heard about indie publishing, and the rest is history.
That is awesome. Now, have you published anything, any works quite yet?
I currently have two independently published anthologies out. One of
Awesome.
them is called The Wrath of Swords and Magic. It's a sword and sorcery anthology. So if you like swords, magic, and a not light helping of violence and other wonderful things the genre is known for, it'll definitely be a fun read. My story is called The Right to Rule, and it's a novella in that anthology. I also am part of the Final Harvest anthology, which focuses on death as the main character. This one I'd classify as a dark fantasy because there are definite horror influences, but in one sentence, death faces down with a necromancer.
Okay. Sounds pretty awesome, actually. And that you said that's part of another anthology,
Yep, called
correct?
Final Harvest, and
Final
my
Harvest.
my story in that one is called Inkling of Death.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, this is kind of interesting question that I didn't think of until now. Are these anthologies independently published or are they published through a publishing house?
Independently published.
Okay.
So basically, I found a group on Facebook where a bunch of indie authors are together. They decide on themes or characters for anthology sets. You sign up for them. You contribute monetarily to a budget that covers everything from cover art to marketing and any other expenses. You then use your own newsletter list and marketing platforms to spread the word about it, generate pre-orders, and it stays up for 3 or 4 months, depending on the specific terms of the contract, and the rights revert to you.
Oh, interesting. That is really cool. Are these anthologies, have they been published for a while or are they relatively new?
The Wrath of Swords and Magic came out in August, so it's been out for a few
Okay.
months. Final Harvest came out October 17th, so that one's much more recent.
Wow. So in my opinion, those are both fairly recent. I mean, I've never actually published within anthologies. I've only published my own no novels, and it takes me upwards of 6 months to a year to get anything out. So just knowing that they were in the last couple months is for me very recent, but that's really cool. I have to take a look at those. I admittedly have not done a lot of reading of anthologies. I've seen them a little bit more since I've been into the indie community, and I've never actually delved into reading the anthologies very often. So I should do that. They look really, really cool.
One of the reasons that a lot of authors that I know that are doing it is because, one, it lets you write in a variety of genres or with a variety of themes. And from the reader side, you get to discover new talent. You don't
Right.
have to just go to Barnes and Noble or just take what the big five or any other publishing house gives you. There is lots of talent out there, and you might just find your favorite author
Yeah, I think that's an
or a new
actually really good
favorite.
point. Yeah, definitely being having that exposure. I've actually been purchasing a lot of independently published books since I've been in the indie community. So I have tried to get some of that, taste of other authors, but the anthology, I can see how, because it's kind of short novellas or little pieces of these authors, you can
Yeah,
definitely get more for less, so to speak, not in terms of money, just in terms of time and reading as well as money, I guess, because you're getting that all combined as one, which is pretty
exactly.
cool. I like it. I'll have to take a look at those.
Yep. And as far as future projects go, I know that you are gearing up for a release of Sunfire. I am actually 2 days away from another anthology release. This one is through a small press.
Cool.
My short story in it is called The Burning Bones, and the title of the anthology is Embracing Her Fire. And sorry, it's part of a series of anthologies. So the first part of the title is Dragons Within Embracing Her Fire. And it was a lot of fun to write. The small press has been very transparent, very communicative, and I would highly recommend working with them if you ever want to kind of dip your toes into more traditional publishing, because just as one example, their contract states you get 50% of royalties.
Wow.
And so they're not huge, but that's kind of in the name, small press.
Absolutely.
And for the record, if you do want to go and check out everything, I do have a link tree on my bio, and all the links are there.
Awesome. Yep. And that's the best thing for me. Linktree makes it so much easier to find all the
No
things you
kidding.
need to. So I have one for myself as well. So it sounds like all of these anthologies are fantasy based, but I think I've heard you mention that you also have an interest in potentially, or you have written sci-fi. Is that
That's correct.
correct?
No, that is correct. I'm part of the Kindle Vella platform right
Oh,
now,
cool. Yes.
and that's where you can find an example of my sci-fi writing. It's Galaxy Waffles is my sci-fi comedy, and to do a comparison pitch, imagine if Hitchhiker's Guide and Red Dwarf met at a bar,
Okay.
and that's the series in a nutshell. And it's very light on technical language, or uh, it's not hard sci-fi. It's very soft sci-fi, but it's fun, and I've just had a huge blast writing it.
That's awesome. I haven't delved into the Vela platform mainly because um, as an independent author, I don't like to choose to make my works exclusive to any one system. And I know one of the stipulations is you can't publish any of your serial writings anywhere else if you put it in Vela. So that's why I haven't delved into it, but sounds like it's a really cool option for a lot of authors. And have you been liking it so far since you've been posting there?
Uh, Actually, yes. And if you don't mind me throwing out a quick bit of information, you aren't completely restricted to Vela. The terms are you can't post your content for free. Once you've posted it on Vela, you can't make that content that's on the site free elsewhere. If you put it behind a paywall like Patreon, or if you release it on another platform, so long as it contains a certain number of episodes, it's fine. You can also write through your serial until it's finished, and then once it's been completed and it's been up there for a while, you can then publish in Kindle Unlimited or wherever else you want to make it available as well. It's what the long-term plan is for a lot of authors on the platform. And to answer your question about do I like it or not, I have I'd say I'd like my feelings aren't about 70-30. 70 in favor, 30 I've got concerns and things I'd like answered, because right now Amazon is being Amazon, and opaque would be the kindest word I could use.
Which is kind of unsurprising. But yes, no, and thank you for that clarification. I was aware of that. The works that I have that I thought about putting in Vela have already been free on my site, which is part of the reason I did
Mm,
not put them, and I'm not continuing it in Vela. So thanks for clarifying that. I did not clarify that. But yes, as far as serials go, I think I prefer to write novels currently in my author career, but perhaps I'll
yeah.
jump back into Vela someday. We'll have to see. Um, but it sounds like your reading and writing genres are relatively similar. It sounds like you
hmm
like to both read and write in fantasy, sci-fi type genres. I guess what's the reason for that? Why do you prefer those genres for your both reading and writing?
Reading wise, I have very good visualization. So the right story, whether it's fantasy or sci-fi, I can almost see it like a movie in my head.
Yes.
And it's amazing to see how physics are defied, how magic interacts with the world, these characters and moments, they're just awe-inspiring. From a writing perspective, well, uh, I could give a lot of different reasons here, but the simplest one is creative control. If I wanted to write a story where piranhas gained cybernetic enhancements and will try to take over the world, and the only way to stop them was to perform a necromancy ritual and raise the various warriors of the Mayans, Aztecs, and whoever, I could write that story, and I can, and it
Yeah,
would have an audience.
that is very, very true.
Just the possibilities are endless, and that creative freedom by is why I love the genre.
I like that you say that it's creative freedom, and I think that's kind of the underlying reason I myself write in the fantasy genre as well as partially sci-fi. Sci-fi does have a little bit more restrictions, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
not in a negative way, just because it does need to be bound somewhat by science to some degree. Otherwise, it does lean more into the fantasy realm of
Yeah.
things. But yeah, I love the creative freedom explanation. And I'm the same way with reading. I've always been the words. I don't even think I find myself reading the words when I'm reading. It just kind of transitions directly into images in my brain, and I kind of forget that I'm reading sometimes because it's just converting into those images. So totally understand that. I'm the exact same way. I've been that way my whole life. But the inspiration that I found didn't come from a conference like you. It just came from reading over. I've read my whole life. I was just like, man, I've had these stories flying through my mind. I just need to put them somewhere. So, and that makes me, I'm curious to know the stories that you've written in your anthologies and the works in progress that you may have. I know as an author, like me, you probably have a bunch of things in infantile stages,
Oh
project
yeah.
wise. Have some of these been in your brain since you were in high school, middle school when you were reading, or are most of them relatively new?
The I can remember some of my story ideas from high school. I don't think any of them are an active project. All of the
Okay,
ones
yeah.
that are in my story ideas folder and file are from, I'd say, maybe 22 up till now. So
Okay.
they're the oldest one would be about 10 years old.
It's still impressive. I mean, the stories that came into my mind in high school, middle school, even, I'm not notorious for writing things down, which is obviously a weakness of mine. I just don't write things down. I'm just like, oh, I'll remember that later. And of course, you don't always. Still, I think for me, it's just the medium problem. I don't do paper. I lose paper and notebooks. I'm not organized physically.
Would you
Digitally, I
like a
can be
tip?
pretty organized. Sure, if you've got
Okay.
tips, let me know.
So, yeah, absolutely. I have been in your position before where I'm afraid a line or a story idea or a scene is going to escape me. So I will quickly type it out, like the bare bones of it, just enough for my mind to fill in the rest, and message myself either through text or through Facebook Messenger. And that way it's always there. And all I have to do is copy and paste it into my active project or my story ideas folder. If it's too hard to describe, or if you don't have the words on hand, an alternative to that would be doing a quick voice clip of yourself, because you can also do that through Facebook Messenger. You record your own voice, say what you want to say, send it to you, and you can listen to it later, and there it is.
That is an excellent idea. It's kind of ironic because I message myself other important details. Like I used to travel quite a bit for my job. I don't as much, obviously, because of COVID, but I would always like text myself where I was parked at the airport or like the gate that I need to go to, like various things. And I would employ that text myself functionality. I don't know why I didn't think to apply that to my author stuff. So that is very genius. I will have to do that rather than obviously try to remember when I don't. Um,
Yeah,
I'm always
no,
looking for advice. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and also, uh, small anecdote, I promise. My wife, bless her, because she's insanely supportive. I have literally had ideas while I'm sitting in traffic, and then everything starts moving, and I'm like, I can't type, and I don't know if I can talk and do this. So I will call her, and I have called her at like 7 or 8 a.m. on my way to work, and be like, hey, can you help me by taking this down and messaging me? And she's like, right, okay.
She's just used to
Like
it now.
through a sleepy haze. Yeah, consequences of being married to a writer, I think.
I think so. My I haven't done that to my wife, although I may find myself doing that more. Um, and she'll be patient with me. We've been married for 8 years, so it
Oh,
won't be that much of a
congratulations.
problem. It seems like time goes really fast. Seems like it's
When your
been
wife's with the
forever
right
and not
person.
very long. Oh yes, very very happy.
Yeah.
We've known each other since elementary school. We've been
Wow.
friends for a very very long time, but it's a fun story. We'll have to get into that someday.
Okay.
Um, but one thing, as we're talking about these genres, fantasy, sci-fi, there are a certain number of tropes that are often associated with these genres. Some of which, as authors, we may or may not enjoy, some more than others. And I know some people actually do like certain tropes. So before we even get into that, like I know trope might be a new word for some of the listeners. So could you explain briefly, like what is a trope? What does it mean when it comes to reading and writing?
I understand it as a series of events or singular events in the plot that are familiar to readers, and they either like or dislike them. The most common one associated with fantasy would be the chosen one. Your
Mm-hmm.
main character is the prophesied one to save everything.
Mm-hmm.
For sci-fi, ancient civilization,
Mm-hmm.
easy. That is the one that has been written into the ground, in my opinion, and shouldn't be regularly used.
Coincidentally, I was just thinking about that. Sunfire does not use that trope, coincidentally,
Oh,
so that's a good
awesome.
thing. Not that it's a negative thing to
Yeah.
say people are using that trope, but it
Oh,
is
yeah, no, no, no.
relatively common.
I just want to clarify my position. If you want to use the trope, fine. Tropes can be like tools or building blocks for whatever story you're working on. But if you mimic the previous stories that have used the trope and make no variations, no changes,
Mm-hmm.
readers are going to catch on to that,
Yeah.
and it will disengage them from your story. So if you want to use a trope, go ahead. Maybe try and coming at it with a different angle or perspective, or different types of characters.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a lot of ways. I mean, that's the great thing about this creative freedom when it comes to being an author is you can be very variable with the way you write things, the characters you use, and even having pieces or full tropes in your book to give that variability. But yeah, tropes. The thing is, I didn't even realize much about tropes until I got into the indie community because I was just writing what I was writing, and then you hear about these certain patterns, these certain tropes in the genre, various genres. And you're like, oh yeah, I've seen those as I've been reading, and it does make me think of other books. Right, you're reading one book, it makes you think of another because those tropes are very similar. So it's kind of a cool concept, and I think it helps readers relate with books both pre and post reading of books, because they can kind of compare it to other books that they've read in terms of did they like it as much or more than other books, which is kind of cool. So that being said, are there specific tropes within sci-fi fantasy that you like to read and also that you like to write? And I know that's a little bit more of a tricky one since you write in anthologies, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, actually, I was taking some time to think about it since it came up in our conversations previously. In fantasy, I have to say my favorite one would be the hero makes their weapon. Two
Oh,
examples of this would be in the Inheritance trilogy written by Christopher Paolini. You see Aragon create his sword. Love those moments of creation and almost self-actualization as they forge a new piece of their identity. And
mm-hmm.
usually there's a magical element, so there's a great visual flair to it as well. One that I never forget and I never will forget would be when Perrin Aybara, and sorry, probably should have thrown in a spoiler warning before I started
Spoiler
describing
warning.
these. Right. Okay, Wheel of Time, Perrin Aybara has this whole arc with the weapon he uses, and he forges a hammer with the world's magic. And it's this incredible scene because of different things in the world that I'm not going to go into, because once you go down that Wheel of Time rabbit hole, it's never ending. But yeah, that's definitely for my favorite for fantasy. My least favorite is Resurrection. I first encountered it when I was reading R.A. Salvatore's Drizzt Warden series, and about the second or third character that died, quote unquote, and then came back, I'm like, so how am I supposed to take this seriously?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I understand that it being Dragonlance, death is more fluid, fine, but it still takes away the stakes. If I know as a reader that someone other writer or at some other point in the series they're just going to come back, all the whole emotional impact of death is just gone. And that's just why I try to avoid it. And funny enough, I am writing or plotting and outlining a necromancer series, but the way necromancy works is different, and resurrection isn't really technically possible. Let's put it that way. And I won't go into further detail because well, you're a fantasy author. You know as well as I do how easy it is to just talk world building all day long.
Yes.
For sci-fi, all right, I've already mentioned the one I didn't like, Ancient Civilizations. Can be done well, just have been way overused.
Mm-hmm.
For the ones I like, I swear I had an answer for this one. I just can't remember.
And maybe one of these things where as we're as we're discussing, it'll just like slide back into your memory.
Probably.
And I can, that's totally how I am. I'm the same way. Coincidentally, I agree with you on the resurrection trope. I find it kind of it's from a character development standpoint. I feel like it just like kills the development of not only the individual character that where the resurrection happens, but also those that are associated with it. Because if someone's going to die, then normally it happens. It's a relatively impactful part of the book, and it almost like trumps that, so to speak, or just like negates a lot of that for me. So I definitely do not prefer that. But one sci-fi trope that comes to mind for me, and I don't know if this will spur any thoughts in you, from a dislike standpoint, is, and this is a relatively vague trope, and I know it's used both in fantasy and sci-fi, but overcoming hero and or small team overcomes impossible odds, like extremely impossible odds. Now that is a trope that is fine. I don't mind it for the most part, but I think some sci-fi books tend to fall into this pattern where it happens too much and it just gets a little bit exhausting, right? And I've read
Yeah.
a number of series where it's just like, okay, that obviously happens. I mean, that's a prime part of a lot of stories in both fantasy and sci-fi. I don't dislike it completely, but when it's used too much within one series or one story, then it just starts to get a little bit, I'm not really enjoying this. You're not seeing a lot of the development, the planning stages of these characters. It's just kind of like one lucky thing after another, and for me there's not a lot of substance to that, but that's just my
Yeah.
preference. I don't know if other people feel the same way, but that's
Oh, I
something
would
that
agree
comes
with
to mind
you.
for me.
No, what I'm hearing from you is that it tests your suspension of disbelief.
Yes.
You keep putting your characters up to that edge, and nothing ever pushes them over. Well, then they're never going to suffer the ultimate
Right.
consequence, which in most cases is death or something else. So, yeah, no, I've never actually read a book where that's been overused in one story, but yeah, I can probably, if I really spent some time thinking, I could probably think of series where that's happened. For another one that I did think of another one that I dislike, and this one's a big one for sci-fi: time travel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, and to be
Not your
clear,
thing.
it's one or the other for me. If the time travel yields tangible changes and results, like Back to the Future,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's fine. And it doesn't even have to be huge world changing events. I mean, the characters can go through growth and whatever, but uh perfect example of the negative side of time travel for me would be Star Trek Voyager. There are so many time travel episodes, and it just plays with the loop concept. You encounter something, time things happen, and then you're back to the point where before you encountered the thing that caused the time incident. So basically, all the story, everything we've experienced doesn't matter. I just don't see the point in that.
Yep. I totally get that. um it's funny that you brought up Star Trek Voyager, because I remember feeling frustrated uh
Yeah.
well during that, and I guess I'd never really thought about why, but that was a perfect
I mean, there are
description.
many reasons, but yeah, that's
That
definitely
is
one of
one of
them.
them.
That is definitely one of them for me. But yeah, we can circle back to one I like as I try to rack my brains. Uh, I guess one question for you would be, what's a trope that you want to write with or experiment with?
See, that is an interesting question that I don't even know that I have a good answer for, mainly because um I kind of want to try all of them, save for the ones that I dislike. And I know that's kind of like a cop out answer, but there's not any
Not at
one
all.
specific that I'm like, oh, this one is, I want to add to my next book. There's just like the challenging thing, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well. When I come up with stories and ideas and whatnot, my mind automatically flies through all the variables and possible endings and possible middle scenes and everything, and they don't all go together. It's just about like, well, which one do I want to do? Right. And so for me, I'm a tad bit indecisive on the specific things that I want to try, because I know that there's a lot out there. I like to target the less common ones more out of a curiosity standpoint, if that makes sense. Be like, well, I know we don't see some of these things so often, so I'd love to try to get into them. And admittedly, not a specific one comes to mind, but I'm curious, since you asked that question, if you have ones in mind specifically that you have wanted to try.
Ironically enough, I think I would try to work with the ones I dislike, just to
Interesting. Okay.
come at them from a different angle. So like for perfect example for fantasy, I'm outlining and plotting out a necromancer series.
Right.
Necromancers pretty much, uh, and necromancers and resurrection, like peas in a pod there.
Right.
But the way I've structured the magic, it doesn't work exactly that way, and I really like the challenge of it. For sci-fi and time travel, I don't have any active projects. Um, but if I were to do time travel, it would be probably in the vein of the time variance authority that Loki did. I mean, I just loved that concept of time branches, but we don't let it. I mean, have you seen that series at all?
I've not seen all of it quite yet. I actually just started watching that like a couple weeks ago, so I'm relatively new to it. I don't know why I was so late to the game, but yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
There's too much good stuff out there.
That's it for me. There's just way too much good stuff out there, and for me, it's just like, okay, well, in these small windows of time that I have throughout the day, what do I want to fill it with? You've got the reading, you've got the various shows, you've got the writing and publishing, marketing. So oftentimes it all gets spread out. I don't think I'll be able to finish something like a TV series, like the Loki series, for like a month and a half, even though there's really not that many episodes, if not longer, just because I have to spread it out so far.
Mhm. Well,
But
fortunately, Loki's not that long, but yeah, the time variance authority is a brilliant concept because it's simple, but also has complex themes built into it. So that would be something I would probably aim for. Well, you're gonna laugh when I say the sci-fi trope that I landed on, because we literally touched upon it earlier. The utopia. I really
oh
like.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Star Trek is pretty much the ideal utopia, at least for a lot of sci-fi nerds. And for me, yeah, I think I would enjoy writing a utopia story because it challenges you to find an antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea of a utopia is that you've eliminated the stressors and, I guess, oppression that most societies rely on to function. So how do you create an antagonist from that? Do you create a person who tries to bring it down? Maybe it's a natural force of the universe that can possibly be stopped uh, or mitigated, but you need to flee from it and therefore abandon the utopia. I mean, there's just so many different ways you can go about it.
That is very true. And that's an interesting thought. I admittedly haven't thought about writing a utopia story, but the more you talk about it, now I'm kind of curious about it. I don't need
It
more
is
ideas,
dangerous to
Nick.
leave. It is dangerous to leave two writers alone because, like Flint and Steel, we will spark ideas and for any listeners who are not familiar with the term, we will chase rabbits, which basically they hop through our brains and we chase after them because there's nothing a writer likes better than a new idea.
And 100%, my mind is, I was like, oh, I should do this. I should do this. And I'm sure yours is as well. I'm like, okay, now I
Oh
need to
yeah.
just like chill for just a second
Oh yeah.
and
No,
write the few things I have in mind first.
I would have 3 to 5 writing projects going at once, and to a certain degree, I do have that right now with anthology
All
projects
right.
and my serials. But because I am sticking to a schedule and keeping myself focused on them, I'm not hopping around as much. It took years for me to develop that discipline and just say, you have a new idea, you really like it, put it in your story idea folder,
Mm-hmm.
develop a bit there, and then keep it there. Because once it's out of there, I can't. I'm gonna disappear. Basically, I'm gonna go down that world building rabbit hole.
Yep, that's just the way you just described it. Although you are obviously in a better place than me because I don't have that idea folder. I try to keep them in my head. So I think it would probably be cathartic if I were to do something like that, whether it be a
Yeah,
text to myself or whatnot, to just store those for later.
Google
Um,
Drive is your friend.
Google Drive is my friend, though shockingly, I have met the maximum capacity numerous times in
But like
Drive.
like memory?
Well, without paying the free memory,
Oh,
yes, I
right,
think it's like
right.
50
250.
gigabytes
I think it
or
was
something.
250, but
Is it
yeah, no.
250?
No,
Regardless, I've
my
hit it before. That's
my
all I
wife
know.
my wife pays for like 2 terabytes
Oh yeah,
because yeah, no, we both create a lot of digital content and we like to store it. But yeah, um,
I just checked. It's 15. Not that it's super pertinent to the conversation, but I did double check. More than likely, I'll end up paying for the terabytes, which I'm fine
yeah,
with. I mean,
yeah,
storing things digitally is worth it for me, just to
yeah.
protect
That
it
or
and
portable
whatnot.
hard drives can be your friend. They don't
I
run
have
unless you
those. Yep,
plug them in. So there you go.
I do have one. It's generally where I keep the audio projects that I'm working on as well. But
Oh, are you a narrator as well?
for myself, yes. So I
Very smart.
I something that I'm not willing to pay for at this moment. Perhaps someday I'll pay narrators, but for the cost reasons, I'm narrating my own audiobooks. Though
Okay.
I've not completed any quite yet. I will publish those for the series and the books that I've written. So kind of
Well,
fun. It's a little
wishing you the
project that I've not
yeah,
done
no,
before.
wishing you the best of luck for sure. I'm definitely planning on narrating my own Kindle Vella serials once I've
Awesome.
gotten at least the first seasons done. Uh, so one of the things that you told me that you do is homestead. So given the loud nature of animals, how do you manage that with audio recording? Because I can tell you I have a special place on my hit list of inanimate objects that for the washer and dryer or the air conditioning system. So I can't imagine what it's like for having goats and chickens and everything else going around.
No, that's an excellent question. For one, our goats are actually relatively quiet, fortunately. But two, we actually have a 5 acre property.
Oh,
So they are nowhere near our house. Yeah, we live on 5 acres. They are probably 500 feet away from our house, if not more. They're like way out in our backyard. It's about a quarter mile to the back of our property. So I don't have to deal with the noise. Our neighbors might though, because there's a house relatively close. Our neighbor's house is close, but they said they're pretty quiet. So
well, that's
chickens are
good.
back there as well. Goats are back there. We don't have any animals that live inside. Although 5 children does make plenty of noise. So
Yeah, I was going to say you probably have to get up at like 2 a.m. to record anything.
yeah, I usually do the recording either late at night when they're asleep, or I do get up at about 4:45 every morning, just to have some quiet time until the kids wake up at 7:45.
Ladies and
So
gentlemen, that is dedication.
it's early, but I'm used to it. It's I've been getting up at around 5 a.m. for about 8 years now, ever since my wife and I were first married. Just kind of maintained that early morning day. I'm a little bit afraid to let go of it, just because that's where a lot of my productivity comes in,
No,
the
I
extra time.
completely understand. I think what a lot of newbie writers struggle with is the concept of time for writing.
Yep.
And we can talk about different techniques and everything, but at the end of the day, you have to make the time.
Yes.
And one of the biggest time sinks I had was video games. I
Mm-hmm.
loved RPGs. I love these huge time sink video games, but I also want to write. I want to get published. I want to do all these things. So I worked to change my gaming habits so that I only play turn-based games most of the time anyway. And that way I can more easily pause and stop, because one of the reasons that RPGs and other games eat up so many hours is because it's a constant fluid state of combat or crafting or whatever you're doing. And the concept of time is just completely erased for you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I know that that has been challenging for, it has been challenging for me in the past, and I know of some authors personally that are challenged with that. So that's a good point. Changing your habits to make that writing time is just essential, no matter what type of author you are, whether you're full time or part time or casual like myself, just with all the
Yeah,
responsibilities. So
absolutely.
definitely something to keep in mind. But well, you've already answered this question a little bit, but I was hoping to ask where people can find you and your work. You mentioned the link tree in
Mhm.
some of your social media spots, although tell us how people can find you on social media.
Okay, well, my primary social platform at this point is TikTok. I do post things to Instagram Reels and Twitter and Facebook, but the link tree does contain links to my website and to my other outlets as well. So everything there, if you find my link tree, you find everything else. It's actually listed also on my Facebook page, my Twitter, my Instagram, and obviously on my TikTok bio.
That's awesome. Remind me what your handle is on TikTok.
Nikolai Writer. So Nikolai. I'm sorry, it's just essential to spell that because I've had people guess J for the last letter, and
Really
yeah,
fascinating.
I don't know where you got that from, but okay. So Nikolai.
Excellent. No, I'm glad you spelled that because I mean, just before this, I had a challenging time pronouncing your name correctly. But excellent. I will be looking up your anthologies because I'm really interested to dig into anthologies. You reminded me of a couple other authors that I've met on TikTok who have anthologies that I would now like to purchase and get into. So
Perfect.
thanks again for joining me today. Hopefully we can do this again. I'm hoping to keep this podcast going for quite a while. So return interviews, return guests is definitely something that I'd like to do. So hopefully we can do this again.
I'm definitely open to that. It's been a blast talking to you, and I look forward to the next time.
Absolutely.